understand why the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives want to stop this bill in its tracks. This is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, I think these Liberals need to be honest with Canadians. They're benefiting from inflation. While record numbers of Canadians use food banks, they're raking in record revenues. But their greed knows no bounds, Mr. Speaker. They want more and more of Canadian dollars. When will these cold-hearted Liberals finally show some compassion, give Canadians a break, and pull their tax hikes off the table?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives want to talk about compassion. They're the ones that blocked for a number of days the ability to pass dental benefits for low-income children. Mr. Speaker, compassion, they're the ones that voted against supporting low-income renters pay their rent. Mr. Speaker, they voted against the Canada Child Benefit that supports 9 out of 10 Canadian families. They voted against affordable childcare, Mr. Speaker. They voted against tax cuts for middle-income Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it's beyond comprehension that they would talk about compassion when they vote against supporting Canadians at every single instance.
The honourable member for Chilliwack Hope.
Well, under this Liberal government, Canadians are paying record high taxes, and Liberal inflation means Canadians are also paying record high prices for gas, groceries, and home heating bills. Millions of Canadians are skipping meals or using the food bank because they can't afford to buy groceries, and millions more will have to choose between heating and eating this winter. Canadians are out of money, and this government is out of touch. So why don't they stop making things worse, stop their out-of-control spending, and stop these Liberal inflation taxes?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what's out of touch. What's out of touch is blaming the most vulnerable Canadians, and this government supporting them on somehow increasing inflation. It's hogwash, it's poppycock, it's simply not true, and it's cruel, Mr. Speaker. Our supports are 1/1000th the size of our economy. It will not increase inflation, and misinformation and disinformation have no place in this chamber, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Chilliwack Hope.
It is unbelievable for this government to brag about a system and policies that have 1.5 million Canadians using the food bank every month, that have 1 in 5 Canadians skipping meals because they can't buy groceries. We will take no lessons from a government whose policies are creating higher interest rates, higher inflation, out-of-control spending that is driving up the cost of living to the worst record, the worst situation for the cost of living in decades. Why don't they stop making it worse, stop their out-of-control spending, and stop their Liberal inflation tax?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Mr. Speaker, it's a bit rich coming from the member opposite that he wants to talk about supporting Canadians when every single chance he has voted against measures that support Canadians. Mr. Speaker, when they talk about the spending that we have done, Mr. Speaker, that's thousands of dollars for Canadian families that are helping them with the high cost of living. Mr. Speaker, we know what would happen if the Conservatives were in power. They would abandon those most vulnerable Canadians who need that support. And when they're talking about taxes, they're talking about things that pay for EI. They're talking about things that pay for CPP.
The honourable member for Nunavut.
The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples enshrines the right to housing for Indigenous peoples, yet many struggle to find an adequate home. This Liberal government has failed to recognize these rights and invest in an Indigenous housing strategy for people who are compelled to leave their home communities. As a result, many Indigenous peoples end up in units in disrepair or homeless. When will this government acknowledge UNDRIP rights to safe, affordable housing across Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the member opposite that the gaps are immense and they must be closed. Every person has the right to live in safe, affordable housing, Mr. Speaker, and that's why Budget 2022 committed $4 billion to...
We have I'm just going to interrupt for a second. Je crois que nous avons un problème.
I think we have an issue.
OK, alors il n'y avait pas pour la